Hey guys, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. NASA, I am an account executive for market for a company called New Relic. So I am
Cool.
Marc.
Hey everyone, my name is Marc. I design SaaS sites that turn traffic into customers, and I'm happy to be on the other side of the table today.
Awesome. Gabrielle.
Hey, I'm Gabrielle. I'm a sales development manager. I'm currently at Infutor Data Solutions. I've been working in sales development mostly as an IC or a manager for the past 5 years. And so definitely have some thoughts on how discovery should be run.
Patrick.
Hey, Patrick Downs. I work at PandaDoc. I'm the sales trainer there, but lately I've just been staring at spreadsheets. Hi, everybody.
Awesome. Joel.
Hey everyone, I am Joel Lalgee. I've been in the recruiting space the past 5 years, which everybody loves to hear. And I recently, 2 weeks ago, just started up my own recruitment marketing agency firm. I have zero marketing experience, so it's been a lot of fun. But mainly just put out a lot of content for recruitment owners and people who own agencies. And the goal is to rebrand the headhunter because they just have a terrible name. So that's me.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'm Francois. I work at Encore Business Solutions by day, selling ERP and CRM solutions in the Microsoft space. And I get to work with Patrick and Amy, hosting this weekly. Lots of fun. So Vlad, tell us who you are, what you do, and then, kind of what we can help you get better at.
Sure. My name is Vlad Karukes. I'm based out of Vancouver, BC. If you can tell, I'm Russian. I was born in Russia. I'm Canadian now, but I was born in Russia. I work for a company that's called Autohost with the headquarters in Toronto. So it's a Canadian company. And we help property managers in the short-term rental and vacation rental industry protect their properties against unwanted guests. So we're talking about things like chargebacks, parties, outright criminal activities, and anything in between.
Cool. Okay. And then how are you finding your customers today?
That's a very good question, because right now we are going through a process of actually like going for a process to define that. And today we rely a lot on LinkedIn Navigator. And unfortunately, that's not the most reliable source of data, because a lot of those companies are fairly small if you compare them to, S&P 1,000 companies, right? So they may be managing 100 to 200 units that are located in urban areas. And that's a challenge to find those people, right? So we try to rely on marketing for inbound, of course, but we don't get enough traffic there. So we have to do some outbound activities, of course.
So would you say like half of your day is spent, you know what your ICP is, half of your day is finding those prospects and trying to talk to them?
Yeah, so we have a few partnerships in place with companies that do property management software, and otherwise also known as PMS, which might be not the best abbreviation, but yeah, so those PMS, they either do some joint marketing activities with us and create a little bit of awareness about our product, and this way we get some inbound leads. But otherwise, we try to use other tools to find those property managers and reach out to them and have that conversation set up.
So right now, if you get on the phone with somebody, do you find right now I don't want to say it's an easy sale, but do you think it's worth talking about kind of that initial, I don't want to say cold call, but going through that today? Do you find there's a lot of objections that are not pretty straightforward to handle, or do you find getting that meeting is pretty easy, and then maybe that initial meeting is where you'd like to sharpen your pencil?
Well, I think in general, our customers or our prospects fall into categories. So those that have experienced this problem and that they're aware that this is a pain, and they're and they may not be looking for a solution actively. Yeah. But at least they know that there must be something out there. And so when we reach out to them, they typically accept the call or they agree to the meeting, and they're actually working with us actively to try to fit that solution into their PMS system and also into their whole ecosystem, because it's not just a PMS. Typically they have, 5, 6 systems, pretty much very similar to the sales stack. The second group of customers or prospects, they are not aware of the problem and they typically don't really care about it. And that means that this conversation is really binary. It's either you know about the problem and you want to solve it, or you're not aware of it and there is no point in talking about it because you've never experienced anybody who was partying at your properties. I mean, maybe they did, but it's not an acute problem. They've never had issues with chargebacks, which, now is a little bit different because they've seen a lot more fraud of the last, 6 months, definitely related to the pandemic. And in this case, the conversation is very short and we don't need to spend a lot of time on them.
So I kind of want to, I don't want to pick on, but I'm curious, like, Patrick and Gabrielle, because you're in roles, I think, where you're helping either teams or people do this, like, what are you guys thinking? Like, do you have any ideas in terms of like where you think right now would be a good scenario to walk through with Vlad?
I guess it depends on where you're seeing the biggest challenge, right? Or maybe where there's the biggest opportunity. So for instance, you talked about there's 2 different personas or kind of groups of prospects. The first one being, basically these are people who are aware of the problem and why your company exists, right? And how it would fit into what they're trying to do. And the second group is the folks who need more education or who might need to be challenged, right? So they're just they haven't felt a pain, they don't know about it, and so like what to do. So from your standpoint, right, like where's the biggest impact?
I think the biggest impact would be in the area where the biggest pushback that we're getting is really on the price. And, it's something where we might not be able to articulate the value well enough in the discovery process, so that when it comes to signing the contract, they actually push us back on the price, and we end up sometimes discounting them, or sometimes we just, because we still are a premium product, first of all, because there are no other product on the market that has, that set of features, or that solves that set of problems. And there are similar products, but there are also kind of in adjacent niches. So I would say that price is the biggest pushback, where a lot of deals are stopped because of because the price is too high. And that means that we haven't been able to articulate the value well enough, so that back on price.
Yeah, because I'm curious, thinking about your sales process or the engagement that you're having with the prospects that you're talking to, when are you talking about price, right? I think that to me would be interesting. Is it at the very beginning, at the initial call, right, where you're talking about price, or is it right before the contract?
Typically not. Typically we try to bring the price into the equation later on during the second or the third meeting. And our sales process is broke down in typically in 2 to 3 meetings. So the first one is, or maybe more, depending on how many stakeholders and the size of the company. But typically, initially you would have an introductory call or discovery call. This is where we try to understand what they're going for. Then, of course, the deep dive, where we try to present them with a demo that is very tailored to them. But also, it's not about all the features. It's about showing them how, the value of the product and how they can integrate that into their workflow, and how much time they can save, and so forth. And then typically the third meeting is where we bring up the things like ROI calculator, or, if needed, the contract, and then the pricing.
Okay. And then I have another follow-up question for you. So
For sure.
And how often, so I'm wondering if there is like a percentage of folks who are coming through who are objecting to the price, and if there are folks who are saying, hey, like this price makes sense, I totally see the value. How often are those two
Oh,
things happening?
I think we always get the price as an objection.
Okay.
It's every time. And it also depends on the urgency of the problem, because, you know, I was just talking a couple of days ago, I was talking to somebody who had 4 guests coming from Chicago who tried to set their house on fire. I mean, one of their properties that they manage. And they were supposed to come, there were supposed to be 4 people, 3 came over. Turned out one of them was like, one of the 4 was shut down in Chicago the night before, you know, a couple of days ago. So that's kind of the acuteness of a problem, where people see that, oh shit, now I need to go back and fix that issue, because they want to maximize their revenue, especially now during the COVID times. And so that means that they have to turn the instant booking on. And when they turn the instant booking on, they just don't have enough time to go through all the steps that they need to go through in order to collect the rental agreement, deposit, make sure that the IG is in place, and so forth. And that means that sometimes, you know, things slip through, and they end up with cases like that. Okay. And by the way, those people were also paying with stolen credit cards. So at the end, it was like a lot of stress for the property manager. Yeah, I mean, those kind of stories are hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean, but when you listen to them, not when you're involved in them.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm thinking about like from the beginning, right? So the conversations that I'm having, whether I'm prospecting after someone or during that initial conversation that I'm having with them once they've agreed to a meeting, I think with this, I think one of the challenges is if you have a technology or a platform or a service that people don't know that they need, and it could be seen as like a nice to have, and it's not until shit hits the fan that all of a sudden it becomes necessary. I think you kind of have to sell to, I don't want to call it fear mongering necessarily, but you do have to drive anxiety from the very get-go. And so like the stories that you don't want to just have anxiety, right? So you want to be able to tell, hey, listen, like I just had a customer whose house was almost burnt down. Like I would take them through that entire story and then ask them about, then I think I would start asking them about, hey, help me understand, like, how many properties are you managing? How much are they actually worth? If something like this happened to you, like, what's the cost? Like, what is that going to be like? Because I think like that's really, I think you really have to almost like the fear of God in them of like, here's what you stand to lose without having something like this. Like I had a customer who had this happen, and I like the thing that I would hate to happen here is we don't move forward. We don't look at this as serious as it needs to be, and something happens to one of your properties. Yeah. So I think like that to me would really be the approach on the front end, and really digging in there, getting a better understanding of like what are the assets that they have, what are the assets they stand to lose, how could fraud specifically impact their business, and start asking them questions around, hey, like here are like what the best companies are doing. Right. They're taking a proactive stance around this. Yes. And I would also get in front of the pricing objections at the very beginning if you know that pricing is going to be an issue moving forward, and start having that conversation earlier on. Like, hey, like, here are the conversations that I have. We get to the pricing, right, or the contract conversations. And here's what happens, 7 times out of 10. Let's get ahead of this, right? So we're not stalling anything. And help me understand, like, what do you think about this kind of pricing, knowing that we can help you avoid these kind of losses?
I'm wondering if it'd be helpful to do a really quick, whether we call it the first or maybe the second call. I think Marc's jumping at the bit to be the interviewee, not the interviewer. But just a really quick kind of role play where Vlad's talking to a potential customer, and we kind of hear basically we hear the nuggets that Vlad's putting out there, and then I think we can help him like a lot of the things you talked about, Gabrielle, like maybe we need to talk about this earlier, or maybe and obviously Vlad, the point is not perfection, the point is you're just to try to iterate and give you some feedback. So what do you think of that? Is that a like?
Sure. I mean, and just to set the stage, just to set the stage, right? Let's say, Marc, if you're the prospect, so you manage, let's say, I don't know, 150 properties, somewhere in, I don't know,
Atlanta.
pick the state. Sure, Atlanta
Yeah.
is good. So you manage 150 properties in Atlanta. It's an urban management company, so it means that your properties are located in different like condo. It's a mix of everything, right? So it's condo buildings, probably standalone houses or detached houses, or maybe even you have a floor in one of the buildings. You just manage the whole floor, maybe 20 units in one of the buildings, right? So it typically is a mix of everything.
Okay.
And over the last few months, you've seen an increase in parties because obviously bars and restaurants are closed. So or nightclubs and people are looking to get away to party. And you were relying on Airbnb to provide you this level of verification and validation. And it looks like Airbnb has been failing you because you've suddenly seen an increase in all this stuff happening.
Okay. And how do these conversations usually start for context? Have you hit me with a cold email or have I reached out from your site?
Either way, it could be, yeah.
Well, how does it happen usually for you guys?
Well, I mean, it doesn't really matter because typically, like if you've experienced this problem, then maybe you Googled us and you found like, gas screening or gas vetting, something. So those are typically the keywords that people find us by. Yeah, so you kind of, I think it wouldn't be our first interaction here, right? It would be after we had this first initial interaction and I kind of know a little bit about your background and your PMS is compatible. 150 units sounds like the number that we could work with. And so we kind of have this introductory.
So he's filled out a web form and, he's a, I don't know if we'll call him a warm prospect, but you haven't cold called him.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it's still the same process, right? It just a little bit higher in the funnel, or you came in.
Okay. Well,
all right.
Ring,
Marc,
let's do it.
Well, I mean, it's a Zoom call, right? So let's play the Zoom.
Oh, look, I'm having trouble getting my audio on. Hold on, give me 2 minutes.
Yeah,
right.
No worries, Marc. Take your time. I know it's always been a problem, and it's always been fun to connect with people over Zoom. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. I'm a little annoyed about the whole housing situation, but other than that, doing well.
Definitely. Well, thanks a lot for taking the time to meet with me. Just to set the stage, I'm going to ask you a few questions. And if at any moment you feel like, our product is not the right fit for you, just let me know upfront, and I'll do the same so that we are both, we have a common frame of reference. How does that sound?
That works for me.
All right, perfect. So tell me a little bit more about your business, how you got in and how many units you manage and so forth.
Oh, man. Well, I mean, I got started like 50 years ago. My dad was a real estate developer in the rural Atlanta area. And, he brought me into the business, initially walked me through my first little house flip when I was like 15. It was kind of fun. And since then, I've just been vacuuming up more and more real estate in the growing, booming areas in Atlanta and, renting it out either through Airbnb. There's some other vacation rental platforms or directly to some tenants.
Booking.com and so forth, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to keep track of them all, honestly, but I mean,
how many units do you manage today?
There's about 150 properties in the portfolio now. That's my dad's company, of course. I'm working with him.
Right. And do you own those properties or do you manage on the behalf of the property owners?
I own the properties. Yeah.
Oh, you own the property. Okay. Yeah. Well, then you definitely, typically the majority of our customers that we work with they have a revenue share model. If somebody's owning that means, you have a lot more to lose typically when it comes to a property.
Right.
But I mean, okay, so you have 150 units and help me understand what is the sort of the mix that you have. Are those the condo buildings or detached houses, or what is the mix?
Yeah, the vast majority of the properties are we just bought a larger unit in usually a semi-residential area in town. And then we just divided it up into a series of semis. So there's a bunch of like apartments like that. It's about 50%. And the other half are inside condominiums and high rises in the Midtown downtown area. Yeah. So nice little split. Prefer the more residential stuff, but
right.
There's more of a price premium on the condos.
So have you seen, like, what have you seen over the last 6 months? What has been happening in Atlanta in terms of rent?
Yeah, it's been weird. It's hard to keep track of all this. We've got an internal management team that reports to us with any like logistical issues or issues with the tenants. But we did notice things kind of tapered off in March and April. Almost very few people were just vacationing generally. So we had a lot of empty vacant rentals. And then the past couple months, that's been picking back up, fortunately. But we have noticed an uptick in people that they're maybe doing a little bit more damage to the property than we'd like for like traditional tenant. They come in,
really?
they'd clean after they leave, or at least they try to. But there's a lot of kids these days that seem to be just hosting huge parties, especially in the high rises. And we don't really have the capacity, or our cleaning team doesn't really have the capacity to clean all of that. So they've been charging us quite a bit to keep that up to speed. And there's been a little bit of property damage increase in the past couple months as well. Yeah, nothing crazy, but it has been a measurable increase. Yeah.
Tell me the worst story.
Oh man. Yeah, dude. Oh, all right, I'll tell you. We had this. There was actually a clown convention, believe it or not, in Atlanta proper, and they were bringing hundreds of clowns in to just like learn how to make different balloon animals and stuff and share different magic tricks. And there was a really aggressive group of, I guess like 10 clowns that just got into our condominium somehow. And they had this crazy party. There was silly string everywhere. There was like holes in the wall. When we left, there were probably 50 or 60 red noses on the floor that we had to go through and clean up. It was ridiculous. But yeah, some of them kicked holes in the walls. I have no idea how they were able to do that. Usually their shoes are really soft. But yeah, it was kind of nutty. That's like the most extreme example. Everything else is a little more, I haven't had any crazy fires or anything, fortunately, fingers crossed.
Well, yeah. I mean, I have a story for you. I was just talking to somebody who had, who had activated the last minute, who had the last minute booking turned on. Booking came from Airbnb, 4 people from Chicago, all good. So kind of they check them in and they have some slight suspicion. So something, there were supposed to be 4 people, only 3 came in, and they're like, okay, let's keep an eye on them. And so a few hours later, they get a call from one of the neighbors, and apparently these guys were trying to set that house on fire. So the neighbors called the police. The neighbors called the property management company. So they came in. Turned out that these dudes used, stolen credit cards. One of them actually got shot back in Chicago a few days before. And these people were trying to set the house on fire.
How about that? Crazy.
Yeah.
Why were they trying to set it on fire?
I mean, drugs, alcohol, whatever, right?
Jeez.
Who knows? I mean, they were shocked. So the next day they called us and they said, hey guys, let's turn it on, and gonna pay you whatever it takes to get our service on. And yeah, they're a happy customer now. But back to your story. When you told me about this party, how much more did it cost you to clean it up, to get it fixed? Because I can imagine your unit was out of the market for a couple of days, right?
Oh yeah.
Have you ever tried to put a price to it, and you own the property, right? So that means that it's going to directly affect your bottom line.
It was a pain, honestly. I mean, there was aesthetic damage. We had to repair a lot of the drywall. There was a lot of stains on the carpet. Had to get some repairs done. There was just a couple $1,000s of just baseline cost. But that unit in particular goes for about $300 a night, and it was off the market for about 3-4 weeks while we
oh wow!
repaired it. Yeah,
literally lost like $25,000 here.
That one in
Okay.
particular, yeah, that was quite a big one. You know, most of the crazy damage isn't to that level. That's like the most extreme example. But yeah, that was a painful experience.
So you have, I can imagine you have probably 5-6 turnovers per unit a month, right? Does that sound right? Or
With 150, yeah.
I mean, per unit, like how many turnovers do you have? Like how many guests per month do you have?
Oh, on the rental, the vacation
Yeah.
ones. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's about, for a single unit. Yeah, people are really only in there for 3-4 days max. So I think sometimes we can squeeze in eight per month. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't. No, probably like 6-7 is the benchmark, but just for for the
Okay.
reference. So eight would be. Though I've had a customer who had like 11 turnovers at one point during COVID. Like back in March, people would be staying for 1 day or 1 night, and it would be like a whole bunch. It was very expensive to them because they still needed to do the cleaning and all this stuff, deep clean and disinfection and so forth.
Yeah.
But okay, so with that many turnovers multiplied by 150 units, so we're looking at 900 roughly turnovers per month. And help me understand your guest vetting process. Do you let anyone in, or do you have something in place where you would look at what they have at the reservation data and assess, whether this guest is going to damage your property or party?
Yeah, we it's really informal, to be honest. We have someone in the team, part of the property management team, that will just communicate with the tenants or the people that are renting the property through whatever application they used, Airbnb, Verbo, whatever it was. And they'll just go back and forth with them just to try and get a feel for who they are. And then we kind of go based on our gut feeling. And it's been fine for us so far. The clown thing was an outlier, and there has been a little bit of an uptick. But yeah, we mostly just verify people through whether or not they seem like a reasonable person with decent reviews on the platform they're using.
Right. And it would be, I can imagine it's very subjective depending on who's working today, right? Or do you have some standard operating procedures in place where you say, hey, you need to look at those things, you need to collect this, like those documentations and so forth?
We've got a Google Doc that we just have them gonna go through with our process, and that's really the limit of it. But
right.
I'm actually being pinged by the management team now. I've got 150 properties to manage. I'm really short on time, so I just kind of want to get a price from you, man. Like I don't know. I've looked at lots of these kinds of tools to mitigate security issues or de-risk my projects, but they're always cost prohibitive. Do you have like a rough ballpark for me?
Yeah, I'd be happy to give it. Just one more question before I get to that, if you don't mind. Like when you said you've seen an uptick in those parties and some not in some bad guests, can you give me like a rough number when you say an uptick? How many per week, or how many incidents per month are we talking about?
Yeah, it's about roughly 1 every 2 weeks. That's generally where we're at. Well, 1 every 2 weeks, there's like a significant event where we have to do something non-standard to recuperate the property. Whereas, previously it was like maybe once a month if we were unlucky. Yeah,
and typically, since you own the properties, typically there's a lot less risk that because you're not managing somebody else's property. Typically, there's a risk of reputation, because at some point property owners would decide to drop off, and stop using the services of the property management company. But in your case, it sounds like you have, let's say, a couple of incidents, and each incident could be worth a couple of grand to you, right? But also it can cost you a couple of grand, but then also there's time lost on the market. So assuming that you have $200-300 dollars per night, so it means that you're probably losing 10 grand per month on those properties, right? Like if you have those incidents.
Yeah.
So with 150 units, we're looking at, again, if you asked about the price, right? And our price range really depends on what risk score we assign to a single guest. And so that means that our business rules are very dynamic. And depending on what business rules you have in place, you're looking at somewhere between $4.50 to $6 per reservation.
Okay.
So that means that on 900 reservations, we are looking at roughly, we'll give you some probably committed volume discount. So we're looking at, $4,000 here.
About $4,000 per month for the service.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. That's quite a high number. Just to give you context, I'm paying about 4 times that just to have the properties managed every month. So to spend a fourth of what I'm spending on overhead altogether for managing the properties on just making sure that we might not get, someone that does damage to the property. And I don't know, I feel like this is all going to calm down in like 6 months. I'll probably just write it out, man, to be fair.
That's quite fair. But let me ask you this question. How much would it worth to you if one of your properties is burned down?
Oh, yeah. Well, the average value on the properties, which seems to be increasing, is about $300,000. I would imagine that's, if they completely incinerated it.
Right. So yeah. I can imagine you have an insurance in place and eventually it's going to cover that, or some portion of it. There's going to be a deductible. There's going to be an insurance hike. So I can imagine it's going to cost you, at least $100,000, right? Easily, just to deal with that. And then the increase in premium on the insurance down the road, of course. And then, you don't have that unit in your portfolio for that period of time. So it's probably even going to be more than that. But I'm just wondering, like you saying that you would be able to write this cost off, and I totally understand. It's a valid, it's a valid write-off. But wouldn't it be better to prevent those things from happening in the first place? And then you can give your time back to your customer support team to focus on stuff like guest experience versus focusing on the checklist, so they can spend more time with the guest. They can provide better experience instead of just handling back and forth on the rental agreement, right? Because we have all of that for, the portal. You don't need to do anything. So, and that means that your guest team can focus on taking better pictures, putting a better description, on all those channels, being responsive to booking inquiries, and also just being there for your guests.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds good, but I mean, now I'm getting to the point where I've got all these questions about how do I know your service is going to work, and
of course
I have to go, Vlad.
I totally understand. So for what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach out to you and we can book a time right now for a deep dive, right? And I'm going to show you how exactly the system works, and I'm going to address all your concerns that you have, including the pricing. And I'm going to show you the path where you can justify this cost. How does that sound?
Yeah, I'm totally down to chat. I still don't know if the price is a good fit, but
of course,
let's take a look at it, right? Let's see where the ROI is going to be. Send me an email. I'll see if I can get back to you in the next couple of days, and we'll put something on the calendar.
Sounds good. I'll let you go, Mark. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Vlad. Appreciate it.
Bye.
All right. Who wants to give some initial feedback?
I'll give some.
Yeah.
Oh, Vlad, great job. I really like your energy. I like your vulnerability and how you lean in. Really, you have a great smile. I think you should use it way more. I'm new to SaaS, so I'm still learning myself. One thing that I found really helpful is tell, show, tell. I think that in those moments when you're listening and you're giving eye contact, is really powerful moments. I would say do that more. And then also, I like the storytelling that you implemented. I think one thing I would say is like you said, set the stage. I would get a sense of how you want to frame the call so that you kind of know, kind of like Monopoly, you want to know that start and the finish. So like while you were talking, let's say I Googled like rental fraud. So I think like for someone like him being so busy, throwing in something in there, like I just saw like, hey, according to reports, typical property managers are saying 15% of their online rental applications exhibit fraud. An additional 10% are fraudulent applications that just slip unnoticed. So that's 25%, Mark. How much of that are you experiencing? Pause. Let him feel it. While he's feeling it, give him that eye contact, give him that smile. Oh, I want a price. Mark, that's a great question. What's the price? The price is less than the $300,000 you just spent on clowns. What I'd love to do is demo it out to you because we give special pricing. I'd love to understand your portfolio so I could speak to specifically what you have. Seems like this call is too short to do that. Let's schedule time so I can, I really like what you did, but I could tell when you felt rushed, you sped up. And so I would just say slow down, because a lot of your best qualities are when you start smiling and you get comfortable and you start speaking slower. It exhibits a credibility, and it's just your natural presence. So I would tell you to use that more and get little tidbits of questions that you could throw so that you can relax and let them sweat it out. Let them say, how do I know about this 25% of fraud that's going on in my industry? Okay, he needs to tell me more. But other than that, man, great job.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it, Nasa.
Joel, do you want to jump in? I could
Yeah,
tell you like the clown
know,
story. Everybody liked the clown story.
Yeah, it was creative.
I love the clown story. I relate a lot to it. I think it's interesting. Like I did a lot of recruiting within construction, so I've got a pretty decent understanding of like property managers and the personalities. And I know, obviously, in this case, it's really a different kind of scenario. I'm sure they would be aware of the uptick and the conversation would run a little bit smoother. But I wonder, there was a lot of focus on, obviously it went to price because that was asked, but it was almost like, I would just like to hear almost like how effective your product is in actually preventing those issues. And that was something that wasn't covered. And I think if I was dealing with trying to find out about this information, I just want to know the statistics right up front of, our software, it prevents 80% of these, or our client has seen an actual reduction. And I don't think it ever got to that point. And obviously the price was kind of forced pretty quickly, which then I think kind of derailed the process. But even just hearing like, statistically, we've seen a 60% uptick, but then when our clients work with us, we've got a 90%, 90% of our clients see an actual result from it, and we just never got to that point. So I walk away from that and go, how big of a deal is this? I think the other area that would be of interest would just to be like, how much training do you put in for your staff, and how much time are they actually spending on that vetting process? And again, we touch base with that, and I'm sure those questions are a little bit more in depth with somebody who's actually doing it. But recruiting, same thing, price is huge. And I always just focus on, it's what is the time that you're spending actually doing these activities. And I think the time on vetting somebody, again, that wasn't necessarily covered in that. So that would be it. I was just curious myself, actually, like just from a curiosity point of view, like, when people work with your software, I mean, how much do they actually see of a difference in that vetting? I just out of curiosity.
Well, I mean, it's hard to pinpoint it down because it really depends on the region, seasonality, and so forth. So there are many variables, but our gold standard is 90%, like you said. So similar to like 87% is something that we use in our marketing materials. So we prevent 87% of cases. But again, at the end of the day, if you see somebody with red flags, and we don't stop, so we prevent from check-in instructions being sent to them, but we can't stop them from booking the property. So because we are coming in after they book the property. And what that means is that it's at the end of the day, it's up to the property manager discretion. If they decide that they still want to have this guest, despite all the red flags that they have seen, they can still do it. It's just gonna eventually lead to our metrics being skewed.
Interesting.
Got it. Got it. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, awesome. But yeah, outside of that, it was a great job. And I just think, obviously, Marc was the property manager of the year, too. You did a great job as well with that, because I would have been completely stumped. So,
Thanks, Joel. I appreciate it.
Gabrielle, I'd like to come back to you because I know you had some initial kind of ideas, and I think a few people have to jump off. So I'm thinking we might kind of actually wrap after Gabrielle gives her feedback, because I think a few people had to jump a little bit early. So Gabrielle, why don't you kind of give us that closing kind of feedback?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think one of the things, how to put this?
You can
One of the,
be,
you did,
you don't have to be
yeah.
super nice. I mean, Vlad's here he's a big.
Yeah, I mean,
No, I
I
was
have
trying
a
to,
pretty thick skin, so don't worry
no,
about it.
I was trying to think about like the best way to put this. So like, so there was a structure that I learned in how to respond to somebody. And so it was really around like, okay, how can you, I think Nasa had already talked about this of like having a structure, having an objective of some sort that you're working towards. And so one of the things that I learned was, if someone shares something, the framework is like embrace what they're saying, insert a value prop, right? So I think this gets to what Joel was kind of asking for, and then launch your next question. So for instance, you did a really good job of talking about that story of, hey, like, someone tried to set the building on fire, basically, and then Marc asked the question of, like, hey, like, like, why would they do that? It's almost like, hey, you're really responsible for choreographing the conversation and leading Marc towards a very specific endpoint, which is, hey, I need to understand, is this person qualified or not? Like, am I actually going to be able to deliver value to him or not? And I don't know that that was like fully accomplished yet. It was kind of like a race to the pricing piece. So I think there's opportunities to start thinking about, okay, if someone's saying something, and maybe mapping out what are the common things that are happening in the conversation, what's the value proposition that I can put into that? Like, hey, I just told you this story. Here's how we can help you do fill in the blank, right? And then ask them the question of like, how are you going about decreasing the risk of this happening in your, like, at your company or at your organization or whatever the term is. So like that to me would be like the one kind of like very tactical thing that I think could impact your conversations in a productive way.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome.
appreciate the feedback, Gabrielle.
Yeah, I think I can't remember who else had to jump early, but I know Patrick had to. So I know we're at the top of the hour. Hopefully this is helpful, Vlad. Like I said, we record it, we post it, and I know a lot of us are happy if you want to ping us later and say, hey, can I do a second version of this? So thanks everybody for jumping on and giving feedback. Marc, you get to be be on the other side of the table. That was great. And
yeah, thanks, Marc. It was amazing.
Hey,
Yeah.
good job. Appreciate the patience.
Yeah, good job.
Oh, you got to be patient.
Awesome, man. Okay, well, have a great rest of your Friday, folks, and a super weekend.
Yeah, thanks, Francois.
Take care, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Have a
Take
great
care.
weekend.